Welcome to Breaking Ceilings, Breaking Ground, the podcast celebrating the women redefining real estate development. I'm Molly McCabe, and alongside my co-host, Jill Ferrari, we're sitting down with the developers, the visionaries, and the builders whose projects and instincts are reshaping skylines and communities. What strikes you when you talk to the women in this space is just how expansive their thinking is. Profit and community impact aren't competing priorities. In fact, they're actually part of the same calculation. And that mindset is producing some of the most innovative development work in North America right now. This is a conversation about what's being built, the deals, the risks, the pivots, and the wins. So let's get into it. Jill?
Today, we are honored to welcome Kaitlin McCarthy. Kaitlin is the founder and CEO of Ionic Development Company, a woman-owned Boston-based real estate development and consulting firm, as well as co-founder of ARX, a new startup creating personal protective equipment, or PPE, especially designed for women. Kaitlin is a civil engineer by education, a management consultant in her earlier career, and a developer and a founder of a startup. It's amazing. Kaitlin brings a rare combination of engineering rigor, strategic consulting training, and entrepreneurial drive to real estate development. What's especially compelling about her is that she doesn't just think about the buildings. She thinks about systems, stakeholders, and how the built environment shapes people's everyday experience. She's also part of a new generation of developers intentionally broadening who gets to lead and shape cities. Perfect for breaking ceilings, breaking ground. Welcome, Kaitlin.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
We're so excited that you're here.
So delighted, so thrilled. So I want to jump right into some questions for you about what are you actually working on right now? What are you building? We want to hear about ARX, but give us just some sense about what are you building right now? Where are you working and why are you doing it?
Sure. So on the Ionic side, we have both the development and the consulting arm. From a development standpoint, we're working on two major projects. One is a 100 unit all affordable housing project that's going to be in the Seaport in Boston, which is it's a public-private partnership. And the other is a 250 unit building in Providence that's also a public-private partnership. So we're very excited to be working on both of those projects. On the consulting side, we have various types of projects in our portfolio. We're working on multiple affordable housing projects, as well as helping schools, churches, nonprofits, et cetera, with their real estate plans and their construction projects. So we're very excited to be working around the region and with different types of clients and partners on all of those projects. On the ARX side, ARX is the PPE company. We are getting great traction with our first product, which was the original vest, which we designed from the ground up. And then we're getting ready to launch a marketplace that will help outfit employees from head to toe on the job site. And so we really want to be the one-stop shop for women's PPE.
That's great. I will have to come back to you on that. I'm looking for some gloves to do some work that I've got happening.
We've got gloves for you.
Perfect.
Yes.
That's good. They got to be in human environments because I'm heading down to the Amazon to build something. So I'll circle back with you on that.
Yes. And we have sizes that will actually fit your hands.
Fantastic. I love that. That's super. That's great.
This is great. And, one of the questions that we love to ask, because development for women is not an obvious career trajectory. We all kind of get there different ways, very unique ways.
Yes.
How did you get here? Obviously you have a civil engineering background, but it's still not that obvious, or that direct. So how did you get here today, to where you are today?
It's really funny. I wish that I knew about real estate development as a career path much sooner. And part of what I try to do when I talk to students is introduce it as a career path because it's not well defined and everybody you talk to has sort of fallen into it. As you mentioned, I started down the civil engineering path, and that really came from a love of architecture and the built environment. And through the civil engineering co-op program at Northeastern, I found my way towards construction management. I worked for Turner Construction for just over 5 years in all different roles, where I really loved getting to be a part of building these big projects. As I was working with developers and various clients, though, I found myself wanting to be earlier on in the process. And so I looked at a few different ways to do that. I thought about maybe getting an architecture master's, maybe going to study real estate development, but eventually landed on getting my MBA. I thought that would be a good way to complement the technical skills from an engineering standpoint to understand the business side of it and then make that switch.
Smart.
As you mentioned, after getting the MBA, I went into management consulting, which actually gave me a really great, almost extra 2 years of MBA, where I got to take all of these principles of running a business and strategy and finance and put those into practice. But I always joke that I missed building actual decks instead of PowerPoint decks. And so after my stint in management consulting, I came back and worked for a developer here in Boston, where I worked on some incredible projects in downtown Boston, a 46-story residential tower called the Sudbury, and a 1 million-square-foot office tower, which is now the world's headquarters for State Street Bank. And so it was a little bit of a circuitous path, but really my guiding principle was I wanted to understand why the decisions were being made, how they were being made, and how the projects were starting. And so I just kept kind of leapfrogging closer to where those decisions were being made and picking up skills along the way to help build that full portfolio.
I love that intentionality. It may not actually, maybe in the midst of it, it didn't feel very intentional, but
Right.
I love that you kept driving down to the thing that was most interesting to you about where the decisions were being made, how it was being made, and really how you create something. And so sort of getting back to, you kept focus on that one
I
point.
was curious because,
Yeah.
when you're working in the construction management side, you're getting a set of drawings that's fairly fully baked by the time it gets to you. And you kind of ask yourself these questions that seem obvious to you. Why did they just do that? Or why did they do that? And so you start to think to yourself, well, would I have made a different decision? Why was that decision made? And now when you're on the other side, you realize, as with most things, it's not as easy as it looks from the outside. And there's a million different stakeholders and nuances and weird paths that got you to the point that you're at. And I continue to try to have that in my career, just to be curious and to understand the other point of view, understand what happens before something gets to my desk, because that's the best way to make change, is to understand who all the stakeholders are, why certain decisions are being made, and where the actual impact lies. And it's usually as early in the process as possible.
Go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, I love that, you've, instead of waiting for a seat at the table or identifying that your seat at the table is not as close to the action as you want, you create your own table
You have to.
by, right, developing your own company. And I want it, and this question is not something that we prepared for, but I think it's something that we all will feel strongly about. We know each other because of the Women's Development Collaborative Emerging Developer Group. We started talking, about a year and a half ago, I think we all started talking, and I wanted to ask you, or just have a conversation about the value of that community and the value of being a part of a community that can really help you work through the problems that you have and find solutions, or even just vent and just talk about that experience a little bit. Because Molly and I talk all the time about how valuable it is to have another woman developer that you can share those things with and bounce ideas off of. But having you on today, it was definitely something that I wanted to hear from you about.
Yeah, the Women's Development Collaborative has been invaluable. And these every other Monday night sessions are just, I learn so much, but also can bring my problems to the table. and you learn by other people's issues that they're dealing with. And what's so great about it is, number one, we're geographically dispersed. So there tends to be a more willingness to share, openness to share, because there's not the question of competition or who knows who. It's sort of a group where you feel comfortable sharing. There's also just the underlying respect for each other, that it's a safe place to share. And I think that the leadership has done a really good job of setting up those norms.
Yeah.
But no matter what problem I've dealt with, somebody on the call has either dealt with it themselves or knows somebody who I should talk to. And that has just been so helpful because, again, you often don't know who the right person to ask the question is, or maybe you're afraid to ask a question because it seems like an obvious answer. It seems like something you should know. But just having a group where you can ask what might seem like a dumb question, or somebody who understands the nuances of being a woman in this industry and understanding how that's perceived and why you might be getting different questions or more questions, and helping each other frame an approach to a problem. It's also been incredibly inspiring to see other people getting things done. I think the economy has been really tough in the past couple years, and so seeing some green shoots and seeing that there actually are areas in the country that are still building and making it work, and maybe understanding why their projects are working and maybe others aren't, can again help maybe get those wheels turning as to what could be different and what could change.
Yeah.
Totally agree. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and it was interesting to me. It was on Guy Kawasaki's Remarkable People, and he was interviewing a professor from the University of Kansas, and she's done research and has a book called, I think it's called Swiftonomics, so about Taylor Swift. And one of the comments that she made really struck with me, and it highlights kind of what you're talking about. And it's that women today are looking at the path that has been taken in the past and the way the systems and the structures are currently set up, and simply saying, those don't work for us. We're going to make a different path. And that's kind of what I hear you saying, is this is just a different way that we as women are doing it differently. And I'd love to talk, I'm going to pivot a bit. I'd love to talk about your name, Ionic Development.
Yes.
That to me is a very different name, and maybe speaks to how you are doing it differently.
Sure. First of all, big Swifty. So very excited to get to have a Taylor Swift.
Who knew there was a whole course and a curriculum around Swiftonomics?
Well, I mean, it's true. And one of the things I've also kind of read that I think is relevant is how her career was sort of built on compounding interest, which is the relationship she created with her fans pays off over time. And I think that's the sort of, and because she's able to relate to and write lyrics that everybody's relating to, she's building that trust in that relationship over time. And I think that's similar as we're building real estate for 50% of the population. We can relate to folks that are going to be in these buildings. Women are increasingly becoming the financial decision makers in their households. And so having that connection really helps. So I'll park the Swifty comments for a moment while I answer your question, which is building your own path. And I totally agree. And I even think we're lucky in that I think there's been a broader change in workplaces and how workplaces are approaching, because I think it used to be you almost had to act a certain way to fit in. And I don't think that's the case anymore. And I think in general, people are celebrating that there's differences and that different opinions and thoughts coming to the table are valuable. But I do think that most of the women that I know and that I've seen that have been successful in this industry have had to carve out their own path, because and not necessarily because of anything nefarious or anything intentional, but just for the different ways that you maybe think about things, or something that you see that it feels like nobody else sees, but is pretty obvious to you. And so I think that I think it's great. And I think that it doesn't have to be either or. I think that, again, the broader just workplaces in general have become more open to seeing different ways and different paths.
Yeah.
So how
I
does that
love
make
what
you
you just said.
Ionic?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Sorry.
Or does it
Ionic.
make you iconic?
Back to that
Bit
original
of both.
question.
Or both, iconic and ionic?
I remember coming up with the name of my company. I was just trying to file the LLC paperwork, and I didn't want to name it after myself because I wanted to build something bigger than myself. And also, my last name is McCarthy, and there's a million McCarthys in Boston. And so it's like, okay, which one? And so I wanted to name it after an architectural term, given my obsession for
Background.
architecture to start. And I looked up a list of architectural terms, and I kept coming back to Ionic. I was like, that's interesting. And for those who don't know, there's 3 Greek column types: Ionic, Doric, and Corinthian. Doric is the most plain, straight down column. Ionic is the one with the curls on the top, and the Corinthian is the one with a really fancy top, just to put it in layperson terms. And so I kept coming back to Ionic, which I thought was interesting. I said, okay, people might confuse it with iconic, but that's okay. And then I said, let me look it up to make sure that there's nothing offensive about it that I don't know about. And I actually saw that it was known as the feminine column, which I hadn't known before. And
Oh, I love
I
that.
thought that that was a nice, subtle way to kind of have a nod
Little
to,
nod.
women are also a pillar of society. And what I was doing was so unique and so unique for this area to have a woman leading this type of company. And so I thought it was a nice, non-obvious way to sort of nod to what I was doing and what my mission was. And so it's been great. A lot of people ask if I'm Greek, and I'm not, but it's a different name. It does get confused sometimes with iconic, but again, eventually people get it right. And it's memorable. I think it's more
Yeah.
memorable than had I done, KSM development or some other version of my name. And so it's worked out so far.
I,
I love it.
I have similar issue when people look at the name of my development company, Renovare. They always say it wrong, Renovare, but it gives me an opportunity in the correction to tell them where that name comes from, that it is Latin for renewal and Spanish for she
Oh, I
renovates,
didn't know
right?
that.
So
That's
you probably
amazing.
have a similar,
Yeah,
opportunity when people mess it up. Well, actually, it's
yeah,
Ionic, and this is where it comes
yeah,
from. So
yeah.
I'll take that opportunity. And speaking of purpose, right? Because your name is purposeful, what you're doing is purposeful. We often talk on these podcasts about how women bring elements of their life, including who they care for, kids, parents, people in their
Mhm.
lives, or other personal experiences into spaces. So can you talk a little bit about that? And I'm wondering if some of this has to do with ARX, that there might be a personal experience that sparked the need for PPE that's specifically designed for women. But what is it in your life and your ecosystem that is shaping how and where you build and what you build?
Absolutely. The examples are endless, but I'll just give a few that sort of seem, I want to say, surface level, but actually make a difference. And so, not doing glass stairwells, I've at least twice in my career had to point out why glass stairwells won't work for women in a professional environment. Making sure there's a law around wellness rooms and
Hmm.
understanding how, where, and why a wellness room is used. That isn't always obvious. There's, in general, and this might be unique to Boston, but there's always this temptation to do things as sports themed. And that's not just a gender thing, but not everybody's all into sports. So in thinking about how can we make a place that is actually welcoming to everybody, and does it have to have a sports theme, and does it have to have a strong theme? And so these are all really important. And in general, as I mentioned before, women are becoming the primary spender. And so if you can do little things, if we take multifamily, for example, I actually live in a condo that there's nowhere for me to stand up my hairspray bottles. And again, these are small things, and the way the closet shelving was set up is not great for dress. There's nowhere to put a dress. And so again, these things seem surface level, but actually matter in the day-to-day life. And as somebody who, if I were purchasing a place, these are details that I would notice. And so I think, again, those are sort of surface level ones. It goes deeper. But I think those types of things are just really important.
Yeah.
Because you're serving, your end customer is going to be 50% chance it's going to be a woman. And then with ARX, it's absolutely from personal experience. It's actually an interesting story how it started. My co-founder is an anesthesiologist, and we were talking one day. We were good friends from business school about how she was in a surgery that required lasers and her safety glasses fell off, and she actually got an eye injury and ended up in the emergency room. And when she kind of brought up that they didn't fit, there was no solution. There was no smaller safety glasses for her to wear. And she talked about how scary that was and how that's tough to accept. And I said, I know exactly how you feel. Every time I'm on a job site, I'm handed a vest that's 10 sizes too big. I'm supposed to be in a position of authority on the job site, and it doesn't help if what I'm wearing doesn't look like I'm supposed to be there. And so again, with this curiosity, we wondered to ourselves, we're in two very different industries. If this is a problem in our two industries, is this an issue across the board?
Yeah.
And so we interviewed women in different industries and found that a resounding yes across the board. This is an issue. Things are made for men, or they're just made unisex, but unisex really means kind of for men. And women were coming up with different workarounds and different ways to adjust the PPE that actually could make it less safe, or they were just quitting. There's a number of women that quit a certain job because they didn't feel safe doing it. And so once we knew that, we felt we had to do something about it. And so we mapped the different pieces of PPE across different industries, and we found that the standard yellow reflective vest is a pretty standard piece used in all different industries, and it's a piece we felt like we could tackle from a technical standpoint. And so we started from the ground up. We did a bunch of focus groups. We ordered vests from different areas of life. Athleisure, hunting actually has really good vests, and we took pieces from those about what we liked and tried to incorporate it here. Originally, we had a design that looked quite different from a striping perspective than what you would see on a job site, because we thought we would do something creative. And we actually heard from the customers that they just want to look like everybody else. They just want it to fit. And so our end product actually from the outside looks a lot like what a vest available on the market would look like. But there's, again, those subtle differences that drive home that this was actually designed to fit better. And the funny thing is, there's an architecture firm that bought our vests, and actually the men like wearing them better too, because it's actually not, it turns out it's not a gender issue. It's actually just nobody actually thoughtfully designed PPE. And these are products that you wear all day, every day. And so we call our customers industrial athletes. You know, there's so much attention on athleisure. Why isn't the same amount of attention paid to people who have to wear this all day doing physical work? And so the reception has been incredible. And I think the story resonates because it came from personal experience. And at any time we talk to customers and women, they're like, oh my God, yes. Oh my God, you finally did something that fits. Yes, this is an issue. And so that's really given us a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of hope. And like I said, we're trying to become the one-stop shop for women's PPE, because one of the things we found is it's not always the women's choice on what PPE gets purchased, but if we could make it easier for the procurement or for the safety manager to find everything in one place, hopefully that starts to make a difference. And just one note I'll make, OSHA actually changed its regulations last year to say that companies have to provide PPE that fits. And so it's not even just a like nice to do thing anymore. It's a requirement. And it's also been a great retention tool that we've heard. People love that they, they can give a new employee something that says, here, this is actually thoughtfully made for you. And it just makes people feel more comfortable.
Cannot wait to see the data on how this inclusive strategy is improving the economy, improving the economic conditions for these companies, reducing turnover, all the things you mentioned. It's just another way that inclusion in the built environment is
Yeah.
good for the
And
economy.
also, as with most of these things, there's an economic benefit. One worker's comp claim is
Yes,
$10,000. And so
Right.
right.
if you can do something to prevent one claim, um, and I think that that data already exists in general for having women at the table and women kind of in leadership. And so hopefully that data continues to come out.
That's fantastic. And I feel it because I started my real estate career on sites doing environmental assessments, and the gloves were too big, and I took them
Yep.
off,
Yep.
and I sliced my finger, and they
Yep.
took me off job sites because
Right.
couldn't fit the PPE. And that was a long time ago, but I get it. I really commend you for what you're doing. I think it has it's a huge opportunity, has a huge future. I'm so excited to watch that
Thank you.
as everything unfolds. It's fantastic.
Thank
I,
you.
I like I said, I agree. I'm looking for gloves, so we'll be chatting on that.
Yeah. What we've done is we have a curated collection of PPE that's created for women, or if it's not created specifically for women, actually fits women. We've tested it. And
Yeah.
so it doesn't make sense for us to recreate everything from scratch if somebody else is already doing it well. So we have items that we create ourselves, but also just again pulling it together in one place to make that buying process easier.
Love it. What's interesting to me as I listen to this, and I'll give you the question first and then I'll make the comment. The question is really about what do you think is your superpower that through all of this can pinpoint something, what that looks like. And then my comment is what I'm hearing is, and you may disagree that this is not your superpower. So, but what I'm hearing is this mindset and this perspective around, Jill calls it inclusivity. I would call it sort of systems thinking and really understanding that when you do one thing, it has an impact on multiple different layers and multiple different levels, and being able to weave through from, pull one thread and go, oh, this is what actually is happening. And so, again, maybe it's around your curiosity, but tell me, what do you think your superpower is?
I think it's a curiosity piece. I think trying to ask why things are the way they are. And sometimes you get to a point where you're like, oh, that's why they are the way they are, and that's not going to change. And you sort of move on to something else. But
Yeah.
understanding and kind of seeing something that feels obvious and then like peeling back the layers to understand why is this thing that seems like a low hanging fruit, why has that not been addressed?
Yeah.
And sometimes there's an opportunity, and like I said, sometimes there's a dead end. I would also say that I've had to develop resilience. I think in that's something that I think is understated as something that you need as an entrepreneur. Like every day you get knocked down from a different, you don't know where it's coming from, but this day this is going to knock you down, and that surprise is going to pop up, and that person said that, and like needing to really just let it go and move on. I think that's something that's I've had to build up over the last couple years, but I think that as I meet other entrepreneurs and more entrepreneurs, I think that that is a great superpower that I'm still honing and working on. But if I could have something where I was 100% resilient today, I think that would be the superpower that would most help as I move forward.
In
Hear
our
that.
little world here, persevere and pivot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Across the
Yeah.
board. One of the things that we also talk about, in addition to resilience and pivoting, just having that ability to adapt, to go sideways when you need to and shift and go around. We talk a bit about the different perspectives on sustainability, because it means so many different things to different developers, different communities. And so one thing we really like to ask is, What does it mean to you? And how do you incorporate it into your development projects and everything you do?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different ways to think about sustainability. There's kind of the standards of building and making sure that that's using sustainable products and everything. I'm lucky to live in a place where that's, it's not an option. So it almost doesn't have to be a thought because everything we design is going to be net zero for housing. Now it has to be passive house. And so we've had to learn how to incorporate those and make those work. And so it's nice that kind of that is just an underlying assumption of anything that we do.
Yeah.
I think in thinking about sustainability from a community perspective, making sure that what you're building can thrive and live within a community and that it's helping that community move forward because you want that community to be able to sustain and one of the things, I love this is going to be so cliche, but if you read Jane Jacobs and she talks about having the 24-hour neighborhood and making sure that, or maybe it's like the 16-hour neighborhood, but the idea that you want something that's both active in the morning, active during the day, and active at night. And that's the best way to keep these things going because they feed on each other. I think there's definitely been examples of places I've seen where it's only active during the workday or it's totally dead during the workday.
Right.
And I don't think that that makes sense for the sustainability of a city. I mean, you're seeing it in a lot of downtowns, trying to make sure that 18 hours is constantly active. And then I think as a developer, one of the things we often think about, especially during public-private partnerships, is how we can incorporate sustainability in more creative ways. In the affordable housing project we're working on, we're going to have a nonprofit located in there, and that nonprofit will help the tenants of the building with understanding the school system, understanding the best grocery stores in the neighborhood, because where we're building the affordable housing is in an expensive neighborhood. And so you want to make sure that the resources are there for everybody to succeed. And so I think even thinking to that level, is there job training as part of your construction program? Do you have mentorship happening? Making sure that we're building up the workforce as needed. So the sustainability almost hits every single piece. And there's so many different ways to approach that world. But that's one of those things that you're constantly juggling, decisions you make now versus the long-term impact and understanding all of those pieces as you build.
See, your systems thinking
Yeah.
is a huge foundation for how you incorporate sustainability. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You were just talking about public-private partnerships. Can you talk? I mean, one of the things I find with everything you've said, and I know Jill has done a number of public-private partnerships as well, is there's a lot of complexity in that.
hmm
And I'm curious about, do you bring a unique perspective to how you navigate through that? Is there a
hmm
key? Do you love it because it's really complex? You know, Talk a little bit about that piece for you maybe from a personal perspective.
Sure. I think that communication and relationships are key. I think that each one of these deals is complex in its own way. And like, I'll give you an example. One of the deals is a ground lease with a public agency that's an air rights project over a highway and next to the train. So you can imagine all of the entities that need to be involved.
And the
And
attorneys.
so, exactly. And having the right attorney, we have
Exactly.
attorneys that they work with these agencies all the time and they're good at kind of saying, here's how they're going to think about it, here's how you're thinking about it, and you want somebody that can help navigate that and not just somebody who will bill you for just putting anything in knowing it's going to be rejected. And so having the right team, including attorneys, including the engineers who deal with the agencies, who have relationships with the agencies, again, understanding, because you want the most you can have be pro forma. You want to be pro forma because there's going to be that way you can focus your energy on the complexities of that specific situation
Mm.
Mhm.
versus, a learning curve on this process or that process. And so it's getting the right team in place. It's really understanding and over communicating as far as who you're communicating with, like over communicating your communication plan
Yes.
and making sure that everybody's on board, and there will be missteps. There will always be, you talk to that person before you talk to that person, but there was no way to avoid kind of talking because there's a million other things that were at play. And so, and it's understanding how to come to that process with that humility and with the asking for advice to make sure that everybody's bought in. It's certainly not easy. It's very complex, but I think everybody's generally rowing in the same direction and wanting to get to the right place. And so coming to it with that attitude is the best you could do.
Yeah.
And not coming at it from adversarial attitude or coming at it from a, everybody has a different pie that they're trying to protect attitude, but how can we all row in the same direction?
Because you're building a community around this project, and
Right.
we as women, we're natural community builders, and goes back to the WDC community and trust, and it has a lot to do with success in public-private partnerships. Molly, you were going to ask something.
Well, I was it aligns with what you just said. It's about building community, because this actually starts in the very beginning, because you didn't just get handed a public-private partnership. You actually had to submit and respond to an RFP and get and present and get chosen. And so it's beyond simply, putting together the actual numbers. The city or the community has to trust and believe that you are aligned with them, that you understand what their needs are and what they want to accomplish. And so again, it's this thread that goes through about building community and trust and communication.
Yeah.
Well, and it's so important when something goes sideways, right? You as a developer, you're going to forget something. You're going to do something that, if there isn't that trust, is going to be perceived as purposeful or malicious or whatever. And when you've built that trust and you've built the community, you get the benefit of the doubt. You get folks that are willing to, give you that trust that it really was an error that was not intentional. And because it can go sideways if you don't have that trust. It's and it can be something that was completely innocent, but can be over in a minute. Yeah.
Right.
So, we've talked about our group, our awesome Women's Development Collaborative group, but, would love to hear what your advice is to future female emerging developers. Anything. What do you think it would be?
Sure. I think you're never going to feel ready. And for me, it was taking the risk sooner rather than later was going to be better. Obviously, you need to get under your belt a general sense for the industry and the players and understand, obviously, it's a personal decision from a financial standpoint, but generally, I think that taking risks sooner rather than later is better. It is a very risky business. I would also say that the relationships are key. If you have, everybody says this, right? But it's true. The network that you've built in your work to date is going to be what propels you forward. And I would also say that try to build that resilience muscle. It is difficult and in some ways hard to do until you're in it. But at least having a group or a person, or we have the WDC, so come join our WDC group, but that you can go to with the ugly, the things that, mistakes, whatever, that they can help you navigate through, because it's going to happen.
What you don't know on the front end, right? You go
right. Exactly.
So is there anything that you want our audience to know about? Are you looking for a partner on anything? Do you have an opportunity for fundraising? Is there anything that you want everyone to know?
I would say to outfit your employees in PPE that fits is a big one.
And how would they find that?
Yes.
Sure. The website is shoparxppe.com. So
and ARX is ARX?
ARX. Yep. or you could search ARX PPE and it should come up, ARX. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty responsive on that. And then we're always looking for opportunities from a consulting or development standpoint. So always love to take a look and always looking for new partnerships. So if
Awesome.
anybody, has interest or is looking for thoughts on a deal, happy to chat.
Fantastic.
Thank-
I think I'm going to ask you to speak to my class this fall. So
Happy to.
talk about
Yeah.
that. Yeah, offline. I'd love for them to hear from you. Well,
Thank
that's
you.
a wrap on this episode of Breaking Ceilings, Breaking Ground. Kaitlin, thank you so much for being with us and sharing all of your experience, your systems thinking, your natural resilience, and your journey to where you are today.
Thank you.
We hope you found today's conversation as inspiring and empowering as we did. If you love this episode, make sure to subscribe to Breaking Ceilings, Breaking Ground, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you know a woman in commercial real estate development whose story should be shared, reach out through our website, www.breakingceilingsbreakingground.com. We'd love to feature her too. Don't forget to leave us a review and share this podcast with your network. Together, we can continue to amplify the voices of women shaping the future of real estate. Until next time, keep breaking ceilings and breaking ground.
Thanks again, Kaitlin.
Thank you, Kaitlin.